All right, so what is by faith alone?
Yeah, so we're saved by grace alone, through faith alone, right? And so we want to get those little words,
Right.
those prepositions. We want to get those correct. We're saved by grace through faith, and so faith is sort of when you use that word through, you see faith as a conduit or the channel or the means, so to speak.
Yeah.
We are saved by faith through faith alone, and so simply meaning it is our belief, it is our trust in Jesus that saves us. It was the grace of God by sending that He sent His Son to atone for our sin. But we have to believe that through faith. It's not through evidence. It's not through sight. It's not through tangible, feeling this. It is through believing that we are saved. And when we talk about through faith alone, we're really bringing in another word that I want to bring in, and that's justification. Right? We are justified through faith alone. Right? We are declared just through faith. Romans, Paul says it this way in Romans chapter 1, verse 16, as we're all familiar with. He says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes." There's that word believe, right? To those who believe. To the Jew first, and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith, as it is written, "The righteous shall live by faith." Right? In Romans 4, Paul picks that up again pretty clearly. But he goes back to Genesis. And when you go back to Genesis, if you go back to Genesis 15, God has just called Abram to basically be the founder of the nation of Israel and to follow him. And he's given him these promises that he's going to bless his offspring will be a blessing to basically all the world. And he's given this promise to Abram. In Genesis 15:6, it says, "He believed the Lord, and He counted it to him as righteousness." So Abram believed the Lord, and God credited righteousness to Abram on account of that. And that's significant when that happened, because at this point, there really wasn't work that he could have done. So some people would say, he was circumcised and followed. Well, that wasn't until a couple of chapters later, right? That's still yet to come.
I mean, at this point, he was a moon worshiper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At this point, Abram was a pagan.
Yeah,
was lost, right? And a 75-year-old man who's lost and worshiping false gods. And God speaks and says, "Abram, go. Follow me and go." And when you do, I'm gonna bless you with all these blessings, and etc. And Abram does, and then in Genesis 15:6, God says, "I now am justifying you and considering you righteous because of your belief and your trust in me." That's through faith alone. He believed. I mean, Abram didn't even know where he was going. He
had no clue.
He had no clue where he's going. He just heard God speak, and he trusted Him. I mean, that's faith, right? Like that's what it's all about, man. You think about the opposite of that, right?
Right.
The opposite of that, I think about Thomas.
Yeah.
In John's gospel, where Thomas doubted. We call him Doubting Thomas. He said, "I won't believe it until I see it, or until I can touch it." And that's the story where Jesus then appeared. The resurrected Jesus appeared to Thomas, came through the wall into the room that locked doors. Jesus just came through the wall, through the door, without opening it. And he said, "Thomas, it's me. Touch me. Feel the scars and etc." and then of course Thomas cries out, "My Lord and my God," and so you see that contrast, right? You look at the thief on the cross. Jesus said, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." He believed him. He trusted him, and cool, fair enough. I'll go.
Yeah.
We're saved through faith alone, not by any. We're justified through faith alone, which means that we cannot justify ourselves. One last example. You think about we're talking about the Protestant Reformation. You think about Martin Luther. Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the door at the church in Wittenberg, Germany, in 1517, October the 31st, 1517. Luther had been a monk, and he had committed his life. He had prayed in the middle of a storm. He'd prayed to St. Anne, and that if St. Anne would save him, he'd give his life as a monk, go to the monastery. So he did. And as he was studying and trying to be holy, did everything he could to be pious, was constantly finding himself a sinner. Right? He was very, very, very aware, more aware than most people of his sin. And he was constantly going to the priest and to the confessional booth confessing his sins. And it wasn't until he read Romans 1:17. Right? He read Romans 1:17 and realized that the righteous shall live by faith. And he realized at that moment that he could not earn or merit in any way, shape, or form his salvation. And that really, that realization, that awakening to the gospel of Jesus in that moment is what sparked the Protestant Reformation. That happened before the nailing.
Yeah.
And so
and it carried over into Melanchthon.
So Philip Melanchthon was a follower of Luther.
Yeah, and I mean he said, and this is 1554, only by grace do we justify, and only by faith are we justified. So we have both of those solas together.
Grace and faith. You see them operating together.
I mean, as early as 1554.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it was huge, and of course at that point, I think Luther died in 46, so he was off the scene at that point. But all of that had already launched, man. It was already fully underway, and that was spreading, and long about that same time, you see Calvin on the scene up in Geneva, in Switzerland, and so
and then Tyndale, he was already putting together.
Yeah. You got William Tyndale. A little bit later, I think you got John Knox in Scotland. You see it spreading across Europe, man,
right.
and it was simply the realization that we are justified by faith alone and not by our works.
Amen.
That's good stuff, man.
Yeah,
absolutely cool.